I want to take advantage of the fact that this is kind of an intimate setting and start by just asking you guys to yell out what you want to hear today. So I have a talk prepared, but if I have a sense of what you're interested in, it will help me kind of direct you. So bring up examples that are graphic. Just like yell out anything that you're interested in hearing about.
What Coursera is ahead.
How do we get onto a platform to test it out?
Okay.
Where do you get your content from? How do I run a local class?
Content options.
I ask these questions because they're making me feel like people here generally kind of have go to Coursera before we become a friend for what it is.
Course management.
Course management. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I would start, I am not a very formal speaker, so please interrupt me if you have a question or you want me to cover something. Okay. So my name is Relly Brandman. I have a science and technology background and years of experience teaching. I taught chemistry and biology, computational biology. And in June, I joined the social entrepreneurship company Coursera. Coursera is a very young company, so we were founded in February of 2012. So joining in June means that I'm already an old-timer at the company. And we are a platform for hosting university classes online. So we partner with universities all over the world to bring their world-class education for free to anybody with an internet connection. So Thomas Friedman summarized the current excitement about online education very eloquently in his New York Times article when he said, "Big breakthroughs happen when what is suddenly possible meets what is desperately necessary." So what is suddenly possible is technology. We now have tools that are sophisticated enough that we can really have university classes online and have very rich assessments and homework and places where students can meet each other, etc. To illustrate what's desperately necessary, I want to share a personal story. In last summer, in July, Coursera hosted our first meetup where we invited students, anybody who was local, so we just met, we had a barbecue at a park in Menlo Park. We just met anybody who was interested to come. We had more than 1,000 people RSVP, which was very overwhelming and exciting, and I'm never going to forget the experience of meeting these students face to face. And in particular, there was one woman who introduced herself to me. She was from a small farming village in Venezuela. And she shared with me that most of the people in the village still live a very agricultural existence, so they wake up in the morning, they tend to their cows, etc. She said, what's different now is that everybody has a laptop, and everybody's connected to the internet. And she said every time she goes home now, she will talk anybody's ear off that she meets and says, you have to go on Coursera. And she looked at me and she said, you need to give them classes on nutrition, on agriculture, on prenatal care. And this really spoke to me. And I think the vision and the mission of Coursera and all of our partner universities can be summarized very well in the words of our co-founder, Daphne Kohler. And she said, we now have the capability to make education the basic human right. So it's this very powerful mission that kind of guides us and our partner universities, as I said. We've grown very quickly. We now have more than 2 million students. We have students all over the world. We have more than 200 classes available, again, for free to anybody with an internet connection. We partner with universities all over the world. We currently have 33 partner universities. So some of you asked where the content comes from. So we provide the platform, and all of the content comes from our partner universities. So again, all over the world. And the classes that we have, I mentioned we have more than 200 classes right now, really span a very broad range. So math and science and technology, medicine, law, business, humanities like poetry, mythology, Some of these are kind of more intro level or 101. So for example, in the sciences, we have classes ranging from targeting people that don't have a science background at all and talk about kind of what is science, what is the scientific method, all the way up to, we even have some graduate level courses in genome science, et cetera. Some very interesting computer science courses, again, ranging from 101 classes. One particular 101 class is very exciting to me because it's taught in French. One of our partners it's the EPFL in Switzerland. So it's taught in French, and the reason I'm particularly excited about this is because teaching in the French language now opens up large parts of Africa, and computer science 101 is a particularly job-relevant skill. But I mean, we have classes, like, for every time I look at the course catalog, I kind of feel like a kid in a candy shop in a sense, but I want to take all these classes too. So there's like a malware computer science class where you can learn about the underground economy of viruses, etc. And just a lot of other classes. So that kind of gives you a sense for our content. You have a question?
Yeah, you say university partners. Do you also have community college partners?
Yeah, so it's a good question. We're just starting to develop some content with community colleges. But the courses are not up yet. Yeah.
I wanted to share with you, I Skype interviewed a lot of my Coursera classmates from around the world on the difficulty of getting an education in their country for possibility of a MOOC documentary. And the stories were enough to just send you.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I feel the same way when I hear the student stories. Yeah. And one of the amazing things for me is, the breadth of the students. So one of the things is that they're from all over the world, and it's very easy, or not easy, but I guess I want to say the first thing that maybe comes to mind is countries that maybe don't have the education infrastructure. And so their choice is between no education at all and taking a Coursera class. But I also want to stress that there's a lot of people that benefit from Coursera education right here in their own backyard. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that the cost of education is rising ridiculously fast, faster than the cost of goods, faster than the cost of medical attention. And so there's people in their own backyards that need this education as well. So yeah, the idea of kind of access and free access is really touching. Also, people that currently have full-time jobs and wouldn't necessarily have the capability to go and take a university class right now. The student stories are very touching. Yeah.
Can I ask you, how do are the instructors compensated?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way Coursera works in general is, so we partner with the universities, and we have, so I guess I need to back up a little bit. So we're a young startup. So we were venture funded and we're social entrepreneurship. So we're guided both by eventually hoping to make some kind of revenue so we can be a sustaining business, but also we're sharing this revenue back with our university partners. Right now, the universities are footing the bill for creating these classes. These are really, really early days in the so-called MOOCs, so the massive open online classes. So the hope is that some of the revenue that will eventually be made will kind of go back to help offset the classes.
So the instructors are doing it gratis?
Well, as an instructor at a university, you have the requirement, you tend to have a teaching requirement. And so every university is different, but what's typical is that you will get teaching credit for teaching a Coursera class. And one of the really nice things about this is that it's kind of a recyclable resource. So there's a lot of work that kind of goes up front into creating this class because it's a little different than a live class, and I'll go into this a little bit what those classes look like. But for example, instead of one 50-minute lecture, we encourage our professors to videotape small lectures like 8 to 10 minutes long about one topic, group those together kind of like you would put together a syllabus. So you have to videotape them, you have to create your assessments. So there's kind of a lot of front loading that goes into these classes. But once you've done that, rerunning the class is a lot easier. All you're really doing, I'll get to your question in just a minute, all you're really doing is just kind of monitoring the forum, making adjustments based on the previous run of the class. So, and then we have a lot of universities that are encouraging their professors to do what's called flipping the classroom. So in other words, they're building this class for Coursera, and most of the classes are open to the public. We also have some universities that are doing private instantiations of the class as well. But for the most part, they're open to the public. You can then use that in your live class, ask your students to watch the lectures at home, and then use the class time for more interactive activities. So again, it's very early days, and we're just sort of getting a universities are just feeling out kind of how they're going to be using these classes, and even to the point where they're just now starting to hire the appropriate people. They need to be able to support the instructors. They need to have IT support for the video. They need to have their centers for teaching and learning on board to kind of guide people. What does it mean? How do you teach a really effective online class, and how is that different from teaching a live class? Yeah.
I would like to take advantage of your interactivity with us to pose some challenging questions.
Please.
Long-term internet developer, I think what we're seeing here with Coursera and other systems like it is really the culmination of what the internet is doing for the world, but also doing to us. Here in the U.S. In other words, there's all of this great information that we have been developing, and we Americans, university systems and college systems have been really at the top cutting edge for a long time, and now of course this information can move freely around the world, and as you said, it can reach all of these folks around the world who would greatly benefit from it. However, that puts a lot of pressure on American workers. I think, quite frankly, if you were to ask me what I think is the number one problem, in quotes, that we have here in America, is that the advantage that we've had for so long, which is knowledge, is no longer really an advantage. And I think the need that is so great around the world is being targeted first by systems like this, but not necessarily helping us here. And what I mean by that is it could, but it's not the obvious first step. And so what I'd like to pose is sort of a, and by the way, I'm not a professor, I'm not a teacher, I'm here to speak tomorrow about an offline concept similar to this. But what I'm interested in understanding is how can we take advantage of these online systems, which are just pouring knowledge out of the U.S., quite frankly, into countries that really need it. But how can we somehow take advantage of that to help ourselves as well?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I actually think it's doing a ton of good in the U.S. as well. And this is the point that I just made about kind of free access to education, very high quality education, not just to disadvantaged people in the U.S., but even people that are in the workforce already or doing something else and want to kind of be lifelong learners. Or I think a lot of this is kind of continuing in the U.S. as well. And we can revisit that at the end of my talk when you kind of get a sense of what these classes are doing. But I think these classes are bringing education and knowledge and kind of, to the entire world, including the U.S. So, but we can revisit this at the end. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah.
Are you going to talk about? I'm new to this, so but are you going to talk about how the completion rates and a little bit about what do students really get in the end?
Yeah.
For a certain number of courses.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I will talk about that a little bit. What I'll do is I'll move on to the next slide, which kind of gives you a sense for what the classes look like, and that will kind of help guide these questions, so you can have something in your mind to imagine.
Can I just ask if anybody's taking the Coursera?
And me.
I've taken two.
Oh, very cool.
I took two that were offered by Stanford, and I don't want to dominate, but I'd like to jump in with my experience with what you just talked about, because I think this is really relevant. And you're right, I was shocked how many people from outside of the U.S. were taking the classes. One was cryptography, I think cryptography 1, cryptography 2, and the other was introduction to networking. And I don't want to interrupt you, but
I took gamification.
Gamification from Wharton.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So, you know what's interesting, though, is there's Coursera, there's Khan Academy, there are Google Talks, a lot of there's Apple U, which has a lot of material. And I mean, obviously, you're venture capital, and the goal is to make money here. And I'm just kind of curious, how do you plan on doing that when you got your competitors who are giving away Stanford same classes for free, but they're only giving you the read access, where you're giving interaction where students' papers are getting graded and their quizzes are graded.
Yeah. I'm going to answer all these questions. I just want to give you a sense for what the classes look like so everybody's on the same page, and I think you gave a nice introduction. So, online education is not a new idea. Universities have been posting YouTube videos of their lectures, and people have been trying lots of things. What Coursera does that's a little different, and this is kind of getting at your question, bringing up what some of the other players in the field are doing. Coursera classes are really run like traditional classes. So there's a first day of class, and the material is released kind of a week at a time, and the community is taking the class together. There's lectures, there's homework, there's exams, there's places where the students can meet each other, there's places where the students can talk to the professors. So it's really run kind of modeled after a traditional class, but takes advantage of a lot of the educational possibilities that online learning gives. So one of the things I want to say before I launch into that is something that we all take for granted. So when you take a university class, you listen to lectures and you do homework and you have exams. That's a typical thing. But this wasn't necessarily what was typical in online learning before. And this is actually something very simple that has been proven, pedagogically proven, to help in learning. Recall and practicing the material is absolutely a necessary part of learning. And so we put a lot of effort into what the homeworks look like on Coursera and try to enable very deep functionality. And this starts actually in our lectures. So I mentioned to you that unlike a typical lecture format where you just be sitting very passively in a 50-minute lecture, the Coursera lectures, we encourage our professors to make these very short modular lectures, and we encourage them to make them interactive. So what does that mean with an interactive lecture? You could pepper the lectures with in-video quizzes, just to give students a sense of being more active as they're watching it and to practice the material. And you can be very creative with these. They can look like a multiple choice test. You can link to outside resources, YouTube videos. You can take class polls. Kind of, again, this is what I meant by taking advantage by some of the online tools. A lot of effort is put into the assessments and allowing very deep functionality with the assessments. So we have multiple choice quizzes, and I'll show you in a second. My slide said, this is not your grandmother's multiple choice quiz. So when you do a multiple choice quiz on the internet, you actually have a really rich array of tools that you can use that might not be available to you if you just have a piece of paper in your classroom. But we also have a lot of other ways to assess students, numerical answers, short answers. So instead of multiple choice, if you actually want the students to write something out, you can use regular expressions. So in other words, you can look for patterns in what the students are writing. So it kind of gives you a lot of flexibility. So if you're asking who's the president of the United States, they don't have to, they can write Obama, lowercase, uppercase, or president of Obama. And so kind of a lot of flexibility there. Programming assignments. So these are all auto-graded. Programming assignments that you might have in a computer science class or a statistics class, so you can have that. So the ones I just mentioned are all auto-graded, and that's a nice kind of use of technology. But there's a lot of kind of open-ended and creative assignments that you might want to get that are, more thought has to be put into them in order to scale. It's not as easy to auto-grade. So what Coursera is doing here is peer grading. So our classes, and this is getting at your question, our typical class has 30 to 50,000 students. Our largest classes have more than 100,000 students. So you can kind of see now why auto-grading is so important and why thinking through how to do a more creative, open-ended assignment, you need to take advantage of the students and not, your professors and TAs where you might have maybe a couple for tens of thousands of students. So peer-graded assignment is exactly what it sounds like. So basically students, and I'll show you an example in a second, but students are uploading their assignment. It could be an essay. It could be a project. So we had a human-computer interaction class at Stanford that had students actually build a physical project and then take a picture of it, or take a picture of somebody using that project, and they uploaded that to their assignment, and then there were a series of questions. I'll show you more examples about how you can use these projects to stimulate discussions within the class. So after students turn it in, it gets sent out to other students in the class, so typically about 5 other students. They go through a grading rubric that has been thought through very carefully by the class team. They grade the assignment, and then the grade that comes back to the original author is the median of the 5 scores. So that's how you scale. That's how you have a class that has tens of thousands of students, and you allow for open-ended assignments. And I'll show you some examples. So back to what I meant by having kind of deep assessments, even in something that sounds very simple like a multiple choice quiz. So Coursera quizzes, you have the option of incorporating randomization. So what this means is if you want your students to take a 5-question quiz, you can actually build in, let's say, 20 questions, and every time the students take the quiz, it just randomly picks from 5. Or you can have a multiple choice questions where the options are randomized. And so what you've now enabled is mastery learning. So students can now continue to take the material until they feel that they've really got it. This, again, I have a graph later that shows mastery learning has been proven by the scientific literature to be very effective learning. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that. You're familiar with it. We also have instant feedback at lots of different levels. Again, these are the ways where the online aspect can kind of add to the typical experience. You can be very creative with these, format them any way you want, embed videos. So we've seen a lot of creative things, JavaScript. Another thing that's really interesting that Coursera classes can allow you to do, and this kind of gets back at the question of like, what are these Coursera classes doing to the United States, to the world in general? With these classes now that have tens of thousands of students, every professor can look through their data and find out how students are learning. What is effective, what is not effective. They can look at individual, for example, answers to quizzes. So this is an example from the machine learning class at Stanford University. I chose this example because it lends itself very well graphically, because students were asked to give to answer with 2 numbers, and so it's easy to kind of see on a graph. And all of these points here represent wrong answers, and the X's represent where you have lots of wrong answers all in the same place. And when you see data like this, it really helps you as an educator, because now you know kind of how to give students feedback so they can do better. What are the common mistakes? You basically become a better teacher. So, you know, there's kind of small level things in terms of like a single instructor making their quiz better, but this can get a lot larger. So you can in general ask how are students learning, and that can kind of help education in general. We have universities now that are starting to look not just at the class level, but look across their classes that are on Coursera and look in general, what are the trends, what's working and not working, how can we be more effective educators?
Good answers. So
Yeah.
you say like the first day of class, does that mean it's a synchronous model where everybody has to be there at the same time, or do they have to be there within a time frame, or turning the homework within a time frame?
Yeah. So we try to make it, we call it semi-synchronous. So the idea is it opens, there's a class open day, and then if you want to follow along with the class community, it does have a flow. So again, kind of materials released about a week at a time. The homework and the quizzes have due dates, just like a traditional class. The difference is that the material will stay open. So if you don't hit those deadlines, you can take it on your own time frame. You can still participate in all the discussions. What might be different is you might not earn a statement of accomplishment at the end. But we actually have a lot of professors that are noticing that we have quite a breadth of students, as I mentioned before, including students that have outside commitments. A large number of our students have full-time jobs. And so we're seeing these flexible grading policies start to pop up, where maybe if you don't make the deadline, then you have a little bit of a penalty, late penalty, but you're still able to make it. Or maybe, and this is a slide that I'll show you later, maybe there's multiple ways for you to earn a statement of accomplishment. So one of them might be turning in homework by a certain deadline, but another one might be participation on the forum, or doing a final project at the end.
One of the things I liked about it was the very short video lectures. And what I took was gamification, which was totally new to me. I could go back and hear that lecture again, or a portion of that lecture. So whatever the learning curve was, it was, you know, it was built in for anybody's level of ability.
I like that point. The other thing we have on our video player that I find myself using a lot is the playback speed. You can play it back slower or faster. There are subtitles, and the subtitles are crowdsourced. So what that means is you actually end up with subtitles with languages all over the world. So that's another very cool thing to see.
Who's evaluating the course and the instructor?
Very good question. So we have course surveys. We've kind of, there isn't anything standardized about these yet. They're up to the professor and the university how they want to do them. The typical thing that we see is surveys at the beginning and the end, asking questions like, where are you from, what kind of background, what's your motivation in taking this class. We have other classes that give a lot of surveys, for example, every week to ask about the course content so they can try to tailor it to the student. That's something that's kind of being handled at this course level right now. Yeah.
You talked about, it's not as if there are discussion forums to participate in. How is that, I mean, you have 50,000 students, how is that divided? Is it automatically your last name begins with H or H group?
Yeah, very good question. So right now there's one discussion forum per class. And what so one thing I forgot to mention is my role at Coursera, so I'll say that now because it's relevant. So the team that I'm on is called the Course Operations Team. So we are the team at Coursera that interacts with the universities. We basically work with universities with the administration and the professors and TAs to create their content, because for the most part nobody's taught an online course before, and certainly not a MOOC, something, 30, 50,000 students. There's a lot of thought that goes into how you organize the forums before the class starts, and then after the class starts you can kind of change things as well. So you see things like organization by topic, so homework, and then within the homework, a special sub-forum for each of the homework, or if there are class topics, or by week. So instead of splitting up the forum by students, so everybody with last names, we have one forum per class, but it's split up by topic, and they're very, very lively. It's pretty amazing reading through the forums. Like I said, again, back to the student stories, they all come and bring such a unique perspective, such a different and unusual than somebody you might meet in a typical university class. It's really interesting to read their comments. So in particular, what's leaping through my head right now, there was a health policy class taught by the University of Pennsylvania, taught by Zeke Emanuel. And many of the students in that course were health professionals. And so the level of sophistication on the discussion forums as they were talking through the issues was just really so interesting and really inspiring to see.
I have a question. In discussion forum, normally you're supposed to motivate, to encourage, to, the instructor is supposed to do something to get that along. How do you do that with 50,000 students?
Very good question. So another thing that we have, this, by the way, the discussion forum, I don't mean to present it as it's certainly not a solved problem. With a lot of students, it can be kind of a mess, and we're experimenting with different ways. I'm trying to hear some laughing here, so I'm sure it doesn't surprise anybody. We're experimenting with ways to do this. So we have instructors and the TAs that can kind of be encouraging and have a presence. But we also have what we call a community TA program. So community TAs are people that we invite, or the instructor invites, to specifically to help moderate the forums. So there's different flavors that this can look like. So some of our classes are inviting course alumni. So as I mentioned, once you make a Coursera class, they tend to be run over and over again. So we have, for example, the cryptography class from Stanford, which was mentioned before, is now about to run its 5th time on Coursera. So the alumni from that class are being invited to come back and be community TAs for the subsequent runs of the class. But you can do this any way you want. We had another class that experimented with putting a survey out in the beginning and asking, this was a math class, and so they asked whether the students were comfortable, if they thought they had a math background, whether they would be willing to be community TAs. There's other ideas bouncing around that haven't been tried yet. So for example, alumni of a university want to get involved and participate. Maybe they can be community TAs. This is kind of a pilot program right now that we're trying exactly to address these issues. How do you have kind of a lively substantive forum when you have maybe more than 100,000 students? Yeah.
Is there an assumption that your class is taught in English, or like it could a forum be split up by language?
Yeah, very good question. So actually, I think that's happening organically. So most of our classes are taught in English. Some are in French. More languages are coming up. So for example, I know there's going to be some Hebrew classes coming up, and I'm sure others. Inside the discussion forums, I've seen, so very typically what will happen is at the beginning of the class, if the instructor doesn't make this explicit, a student will start to make a post, where are you from, why are you taking this class? And so you see where everybody is from, and they start to form study groups. And I've seen some forum threads that end up being language specific, for example, in Portuguese. We also have some classes that are experimenting with making their homework in specific languages. So again, the human-computer interaction class from Stanford had their peer assessments both in English and in Spanish. And the sustainability class from the University of Illinois had their assignments, some of their assignments were in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. They put out a survey at the beginning of the class and they asked where people were from, and those are the languages that were most represented. Yeah. Yeah.
Could you say a little bit more about your student demographics? Are you seeing patterns emerge, or is it completely vary from class to class?
Yeah, I only have anecdotal evidence right now. We haven't really done, we're basically just now starting to analyze all of this data. We see a lot of, students from all over the world, a lot of students from the U.S., a lot of students from Brazil and India, but lots of other countries are represented. I have a slide prepared that just kind of gets at it. So that's kind of geographical breadth. But I want to give you also a sense of kind of background breadth, and this is something that I alluded to before. I'm choosing a slide now from the very end of my talk. But I just went through a couple of our forums, and I started to read through it, and I said I get very inspired by these student stories. As a practicing physician, as a police officer, I'm 79 years old, as an environmental architect, and I could have made like a slide with 100 of these. They're very inspiring. And again, back to this theme of people that have full-time jobs. One of the very cool things that we're seeing is kind of professional exchanges. For example, in the sustainability class from the University of Illinois, they had their students build a project. And one of the students decided to do for their project a kind of decision tree on whether or not you should do LEED best practices in your building. So I don't remember what LEED stands for, but it has something to do with kind of being environmentally conscious in your building codes. And he started to get other students in the class saying, I'm a professional in this, I need to make this decision, what do you think? The student himself is using that project to train people at his company. Other people, again, in the same field were kind of giving constructive criticism about how to make that report better. This is just one example, but again, it gives you a sense of the breadth of the students. We also are noticing that some students that haven't entered the university yet but are thinking of it and want kind of an introductory course, we're also seeing those types of students as well. Yeah, again, it's anecdotal now, but we're interested in the exact same questions when we're doing those types of analyses.
That brings to mind the question of accessibility.
Yeah. So we're very sensitive about accessibility issues. So from the very beginning, our platform was built. So I don't know the name of the codes, but there's certain codes that you need to follow to make sure that you're accessible. So for example, when you write software, you have to make sure that it's compatible with screen readers for people that are blind. So we have all of that. We have the subtitles for all of our lectures. We have a special like an email address, accessibility@coursera.org. So if you have any questions, you can email us directly and we will help you out. So we try to be as sensitive as we can about accessibility issues. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier the statement
Statement of accomplishment, yeah.
And that's what you receive after successfully completing the course.
Yeah.
And then what are you finding as far as how these are applied towards something, like whether it's CEUs or credits or professional growth and development? So what's happening?
Very good question.
And also, is your LMS, is it a Moodle, or what is your?
So we're not really an LMS. We are a platform.
You are a platform.
So essentially, when a university partners with us and decides they want to make a class, they get an empty class. So they get the front page of the class, and they get all the tools for creating their class. And that's what we provide them, that and kind of working with our team to kind of guide them through what it means to create a MOOC.
You know, I teach online as well, took the Coursera course, and the only thing I could allude it to is it made, and I use the angel.
So do I.
It makes angel look like a constable. It really does.
So, you know, again, it's early days. It's unclear how people are using our statements of accomplishment, but a little bit of anecdotal evidence. When I first joined the company, I sat in on a couple of student interviews where we basically had Skype interviews with students, and we asked them, what would you do with a statement of accomplishment? Mm-hmm. And some people are bringing it back to their employer and saying, hey, you know, I want to maybe transition. Here's the evidence, you know, that I have a background in this. I talked to a student in Brazil who was using it as evidence that he spoke good English because he got a statement of accomplishment in a class that was taught in English. I've seen actually this post right here. As an environmental architect, my state licensing board requires me to take a certain amount of continuing education each year to maintain my license. This Coursera course fulfills that requirement. So we're just starting to see these things emerge. And yeah, I'd be very excited to see where this leads in the future. And I'll get to your question in a moment, and I want to answer the previous question you had about retention. So we have, as I mentioned, these very, you know, kind of staggering enrollments, especially relative to live classes. But what does that mean? How many students are really finishing at the end? So as you can imagine, it's smaller. So by the time you get to the very end, less people are earning the statement of accomplishment. It's quite variable. So we're kind of seeing things between the 10 and the 30% range. However, even the students that are not earning the statements of accomplishment, we have a ton more active students. So for example, we have what you might call an auditor, so students that are not taking the homework, but they're just watching the lectures and maybe participating on the forums, or students that are maybe coming in because there's a particular topic that they're interested in. They don't care so much if they get a statement of accomplishment, particularly students that might have a job, so you know, they already have a university degree. So yeah, the question is about.
Who owns the content? What is the intellectual property?
Very good question. So as I mentioned, so we are the platform and the university provides the content, and all of the IP and content belongs to the university. Okay, 10 more minutes, okay. So, let's see. I want to show you what a peer, actually I want to show you, just spend a little bit of time on peer assessments because these can be very cool and they give you a sense. I think, you know, I guess I want to share this story because I feel like what students are coming up with are so creative, and it kind of, I hate to use a cliche, but just to kind of put this image in your mind, it kind of breaks the mold of what you think of when you think of online education. So as I mentioned before, there's a sustainability class from the University of Illinois, and they had their students create a final project if they wanted to earn a project badge. And they left this very, very open-ended. So we have other classes that have more traditional peer assessments, like creating an essay, for example. But this particular example was a project that was very open-ended. Students could upload a PowerPoint presentation, a video, an essay, kind of anything that they wanted. And one group of students decided that for their project they were going to host an online conference on sustainability. So they set the date, they put it together, they got people from all over the world. They had, I think I have 50 members from 26 countries, 25 people from 18 countries, and they met for this conference, and it was such a success that they continue to meet. So basically anytime anybody on their mailing list or on their Facebook page has a sustainability issue that they want to talk about with their fellow students, they'll call a meeting and they'll have another online conference. So that's one example of the peer grading homework, something that comes out. Another example that I want to point out, and I kind of alluded to this before, is you might think of a more typical assignment as the instructor gives the students an assignment. Students do their assignment at home, or maybe they do in a group, then they turn it in, and that's kind of the end of the assignment. But one nice thing that you can do in a live classroom and now also online is you can use that assignment to kind of stimulate discussion. So for our peer assessments, you can enable a functionality to do what we call automatic forum posting. So what this does is after students submit, so this is an example from our University of Pennsylvania modern poetry class, where they had students do what's called a close read of a poem. And in this particular example, they were reading a poem by William Carlos Williams. And the student decided to write a letter to William Carlos Williams in the voice of another poet, Ezra Pound, and that was his assignment. He uploaded it into the peer assessment system. It got sent out to the 5 other students to be graded. And then the extra step here that this professor enabled is then this assignment, in addition to all of the comments from the student graders, got posted on the discussion forum. So once it's on the discussion forum, now anybody in the class can talk about it. And the author can have a conversation with the graders, and anybody in the class can comment. You can vote if you like that particular assignment. And so you suddenly have these conversations kind of blossom around these assignments, and it's very exciting to see. And I'm running out of time, so maybe I won't go through all of this, but it's also really amazing. You know, peer assessment is kind of, it's not a new concept, but it's a new thing for students to become familiar with in the context of a university class. And so it's really amazing to see these students go through and start to enjoy it. So maybe I'll just take you through this quickly. So here was the submission. Here's a comment from a student grader. Another student making a comment on the joke about how, oh, you didn't send an email, you sent a letter because it was 1914. And in the beginning, the student author went on the forum and just said thank you. But then he started to get excited because the other students were kind of participating so much and giving him such useful comments, and he was so excited that people enjoyed some of the inside jokes that he put in there. And then another student put in, since the initial submission was a letter, so another student come in and answered with a letter. So, and this is like a very thriving forum where I think, 872 views, 60 posts, it probably has more now, continued much after the due date. Somebody here asked about due dates. So very kind of lively. I always think of these classes as kind of alive with the students crawling on it. So we don't have this anymore, but in early days in the company, we had it was kind of manual flipping the switch when the class became live, and it always happened. The classes tend to start on Monday, so it happened like midnight and 1 minute on Monday. So I'm at home in my pajamas, like getting ready to flip the switch, and I love that first moment after you make it live, because within seconds, the students are on the discussion forums, kind of meeting each other, trying the different things, finding the bugs. Like, it's really these communities are very much alive with students, and it's exciting. As you can tell, I'm very excited about it. It's exciting to see. Yeah. Okay. I want to say something about personalized learning. So I've alluded to the fact that I think, these courses, in a sense, back to the question about what are these courses kind of giving back to the United States, giving back to the world in general. I think we have the opportunity now to learn a lot about education. We have the opportunity to take some of these pedagogical things that we know work and incorporate them into online learning, take these online tools, use them in our live classes as well. And one of those is the idea of personalized learning. So I mentioned before, this can happen in many ways, but an easy way to visualize this is with the lectures. So if you make short modular pieces. So lectures that are about one thing, and you kind of group them together. You can now allow students to make their own pathway through the material. So a nice example of this, and I hope I have it this one next, yep, is the Duke Introduction to Genetics and Evolution class, where every lecture was labeled as either G or S, or both. So G is generalist and S is specialist. So now students can kind of, if they feel like they want extra material, if they want, they already know the material, they want some kind of application, they kind of know where to look. And that entire class can be built like this. So this is the trend that we're seeing.
Can they accelerate?
Yeah. So, I guess it depends on what your goals are. So the class does have like I said, the community kind of takes it together, so the material is released a week at a time. You can watch, so it'd be hard to watch it any faster than that, but you can pick and choose what you want to participate in. So if there are certain topics that you're interested in, again, there may be certain requirements to earn a statement of accomplishment, but yeah.
To what extent do the universities offer university credit for the courses versus a statement of accomplishment?
Yeah, so and this is getting, at the very beginning I asked about what people were interested in hearing. So right now this is completely separate. A statement of accomplishment on Coursera is completely separate from course credits at a university. But we just signed a content licensing agreement with Antioch University, specifically their Los Angeles campus, where they took two of our courses, both from the University of Pennsylvania. One was mythology and one was modern poetry, and they're actually going to run closed instantiations of these classes on their campus and offer it to students for credit. So they're targeting two types of students. High school level students that are interested in college level, kind of transitioning to college, and then college level students. Each of their classes is going to have a local professor. They're going to supplement the Coursera class with materials that really targeted for their student demographic. And they're also going to have live versions of their class for students that want the option of having face-to-face time. And these are for credit at Antioch University. And this kind of gets at some of the questions that were asked earlier. Again, very early days. This is I think this was announced in October. This is really new. And I think these two classes, actually I'm blanking on when they ran, so maybe I won't say that, but they also ran in the fall. So, yeah.
So Antioch had to pay you to get these classes?
That's right. Yeah.
And did you pay who created the course?
Yeah, so I'm on so this starts to get into less of my area of expertise is the business field. I'm happy to try to look up that information if anybody wants to catch me offline, but I actually don't know enough about those fields to speak about them. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's probably a longer discussion, but there is so much free information out there today. Right? And it just makes sense that some of that free information is going to make its way into courses, and nobody's going to get paid for that. And that's fine. I think where I'm kind of curious about is how can we sort of take that as a platform to build upon and try to offer, whether it's online courses or hybrid, where the value add is worth paying for, or there's obvious value being created, and therefore somebody's going to get something out of it, whether it's the instructor or the student or whatever. But how do we go beyond what's been out there and it's kind of just free?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think our co-founder, so we have two co-founders, Daphne Kohler and Andrew Ng. So Andrew always reminds us in all of our meetings to have that, if we ever have a question or we're ever trying to figure out a direction, that we always think about what's best for the students. And back to kind of the earlier issues that we're talking about with accessibility, whether that be geographic or economic, whatever it is, all of the courses that are on Coursera.org right now are free now and will always be free. And that it's not just about the information. As I hope I've explained to you, it's really about the experience of being in these class communities. Really, these classes are focused on effective education and learning, not just putting the information up there. Again, what is best for the students? We really feel that this is an effective way to learn. We really feel that this is kind of a value add. Antioch University, for example, another issue that was raised earlier was the high cost of education and the rising cost of education. Antioch is making these particular classes available to students at a less of a cost of their other classes that they provide. So they're experimenting with different ways to bring the cost down. Our university partners also are experimenting with ways of bringing costs down. So again, early days, it's unclear where this is going, but in my opinion, this is all great for the students. All of this choice, all of these class communities, not just Coursera, but Khan Academy and Udacity and the other companies, people are trying different things. In the end, it's the students that really benefit because everybody learns in a different way. One person might like this style, one person might like, but we're giving students this choice, and we're learning about how they learn and making education better. So, yeah. Yes?
So I would just, I hope people don't mind me.
But we're kind of at the end.
Okay, I'll make it quick. So again, you know, I don't think anybody that's making information available to people is a bad idea. I think it's a great idea. I think most people do it. And then making it the interaction better, I think is also great. I think what I'm kind of getting at here is how can we, whether it's the community college system in California or you know, those who have enjoyed advantage in the past, who don't want to just simply put on an equal playing field with the rest of the world, which again, great for them, but what about us, right? How do we as instructors, as a community, you know, here, learn from what's going on and try to take things even further, which is, of course, benefits us in the short run, but eventually leads to others benefiting too, right? But how do we do that? What are the things that we should be looking for that can build upon this in a way that we here will get an advantage, you know, by doing it?
I love that question. And again, you know, there's no answer. These are very early days. All of the people that put their classes up on Coursera and the university partners, they're really pioneers in kind of making this work and feeling out and trying things. It's unclear what's going to work, what's not going to work. And I love that question because I think all of us should be thinking as educators, like, how do we, you know, this is happening now. How do we take advantage of this? How do we help students better because of this? How can I take this back to my classroom? So I love that question.
I have a friend who is working now at the University of Maryland, experimenting with 3 different formats. One online only, one classroom only, and one hybrid. And he's part of that physical institution experimenting with the gradient of how much online they want to do from their university. And he's, as a professor, experimenting with being the teacher in all 3 formats over a period of like 2 years. And they're seeing what works for him, and I'm sure they're seeing what works for them, but it's based in the building, and it's built based there on the university. I imagine that if you just view it on a continuum with a sliding bar, that institutions and people will, and if it's movable, then we'll see.
I want to kind of supplement your point with, there was a study, and I'm going to who does the study, but if you go to Coursera.org, we have a pedagogy page that talks about it. So there was a meta-study that basically looked at live versus online learning and then hybrid where you use both, and basically determined that students were learning equally well with live versus online, but learned better with a hybrid.
Do students need to take an assessment before they're eligible to take the course?
Nope, anybody can enroll. There's no like admissions office. If you're interested,
no criteria
correct.
That they need to have.
So,
their computers, there's nothing.
I'm so glad you asked that. So because the spirit of this is to have everything be free, we asked our instructors to think carefully about not requiring textbooks or any information that a student would have to pay for. So if they need reading material, make sure it's open source reading material. Don't ask students to use software that they might have to pay for if they use freeware. And like I said, anybody can sign up, but on the course description page, you can read about whether or not that particular class is relevant for you. So for example, is it a basic undergraduate course? Is it an advanced undergraduate course? do you need a background for this course? But if you want to sign up, anybody can sign up.
It just also meant the technological capabilities of your...
Any computer that has internet connection. Yeah, you need an internet browser, basically. Yeah.
You look at this kind of from the student's point of view, because I often have my students go out onto the internet, and the problem is, like you've got YouTube, it's uploading, people are uploading 72 hours every minute of video, and a lot of that's instructional. There's Khan Academy, there's Coursera, there's Google Talk, there's TED Talks. And the problem is, if you're a student, where do you go? You know, and it's hard to navigate to find the specific courseware. And you've broken it up into like 10-minute segments, but it'd be nice if you have the whole hour, because that way you can scroll through it instead of now you've got to go through 10 different pieces instead of one piece.
So there's a basic assumption that I just want to clarify. When you go to Coursera.org, you're not looking through 10-minute lectures. You're actually looking through courses, like a course catalog.
Right.
You see, you know, calculus, statistics, biology, chemistry. Then within the class, the instructor may choose to use lecture videos, and then you would have, you know, 10-minute lecture videos. So in that sense, it's a little different than a place like Khan Academy, where depending on the topic, you would just go in and watch a 10-minute video, and then you would be done. Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.